Yo, what is going on, guys? It is Derek with Raleigh Restorations. So you finally found some time to sit down and work on your shoes. You strip the midsole just to be left with something like this. If you look closely, you can see the factory imperfections in the midsole. But don't worry about it. By the end of this video, you're going to know how to fix it. Damn. So you've probably seen it before. Those little holes in the midsole, the porousness, or the overall rough look, it just doesn't look smooth. And sometimes if you look at the midsole before stripping it, you can even see the pores through the factory paint. This is actually where midsole magic is helpful because it doesn't damage and expand those pores as opposed to acetone or other harmful chemicals that actually seep into those pores and expand them, making the process we're about to do much harder. But we'll cover that later. But right now we're going to jump right into this to show you how to get from this to this. So the nice part about this process, besides the time it takes, which is not great, you don't need many things besides what you're already using. Again, those scoffing pads I show you here, those are the really fine grit, and I'll show you where to get those. A paintbrush and just the paint of your choice that you're using. I showed the scratch resistant sealer, but we'll get to that later if you need it. Alright guys, bring it in. So you can see here, I've actually already put paint down to save you some time, but you're starting to see that this paint is not doing us any favors with those pores. It's still very easy to see. I know on the camera right now it's probably weird and the light might be a little bright. Those pores are still here, but there's about 3 or 4 coats. And actually that before picture, there was still 3 or 4 coats on there, if that gives you any idea. So this is where the real work begins with the tips on this video. We're gonna go ahead and go back and start painting on just those porous, rough areas that we can see right now. And we're gonna go pretty heavy with the paint. I know I always stress light coats. This is the one time, the one exception, the one pass you guys get to paint heavy. So go ham on it. Don't go ham, but go pretty heavy. I'm about to go ham! So I'm just going to show you a little bit of footage of me going over and literally just getting paint on those porous areas. Getting a little bit on the smooth areas is fine because we're going to go back and sand all that out. But the whole point here is to pretty much fill up those pores with the paint. And that's the thing, people are thinking too hard. How do I cover this? How do you cover most things? You fill it and then you smooth it out. It's the same process. So just fill those up with paint, focus on the pores, and we're going to go back and sand that. So right now I'm not worried about brush strokes. I'm literally just dabbing onto the midsole right now. I'm just literally applying paint and just smoothing it out a little bit. Again, you don't want it to get super chunky, and if you see little pieces in the paint, definitely pull those out with your finger. But these definitely don't need to be as smooth as if you were repainting the midsole. We're literally just trying to get a good amount of paint into those pores and just focus on those porous areas. So in this specific case with the two-tone midsole, you can go ahead and apply this method right now with the white on this area where the black is going to be. However, I like to do the same process we're doing right now after I finish the white with this process and then do it with the black paint. That way the black paint is much more full, obviously, because it's black and it hides a little bit of those imperfections and you don't have to do as many coats of white. Also, the overall amount of layers, if you do this process with the white, and you can't see how smooth it is, and then you put on the black and you see it's still a little porous, you're gonna have to add more black coats. So the least amount of coats that you put on overall between the white and black, the better. So if we can eliminate the extra coats of white and just do this process with black, I think that's the smartest way to go about it. So once I finish painting all the pores, I'm going to go ahead and take the shoe and just place it in front of the fan to dry with the air dry method. Again, you can check out that video above up here if you're curious as to why we're using the fan to dry the shoe. Alright, so it's been about 15 minutes here with the shoe, so this is probably completely dry. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the sanding portion. Alright, so now for this part, we're going to start the sanding, and I'm actually today using the Scotch finishing pads. I'll go ahead and link that in the description below, as I don't know the exact name, but I will find that for you guys if you want to get these exact ones. And I know for a fact I've done a bunch of the 2011 black cement 3s. The pores aren't too bad, but they still are unsightly, so these will work perfect, and I know that as I've done this before. However, let's say you're cleaning up someone else's work or you didn't use midsole magic, and the pores are getting really big, so they use acetone, and it's soaked into the pores and expanded them like we talked about earlier. You can actually use scratch resistant sealer here to cover those pores more. So this paint is pretty thin, whether you're using Angelus or Jacquard. The scratch resistant sealer is really thick, so it's actually going to fill in those pores a little bit more, so you don't have to do a ton of layers with paint. I haven't actually tried it myself to use the paint to fill out really, really bad pores. I just feel like it would be too much paint and it would end up cracking. And this stuff is super flexible, so as long as you've prepped well and you've checked out our other videos on how to do that, you're going to be safe with the scratch resistant sealer. Then instead of using the paint, you're just going to use the sealer, but you're going to start with a higher grit sandpaper. And we're about to sand this right now, and we're going to repeat this process a few times, as you'll see, until it's completely smooth. But with the scratch resistant sealer, you do a lower grit, and then you're working your way up to this finishing pad here to get that smooth factory finish. So here what we're doing, we're just going to go over this with this finishing pad. And we're just going to lightly sand. Let the pad do the work. You can apply a little bit of pressure, but you're mainly going to focus on these porous areas. So anywhere that's already smooth or the surrounding edges of the pores, you're just going to let this do the work. And then when I reach over this pore, I'll put in a little bit of pressure, but it's not a lot. And if you have any chunks of paint that came out since you were going a little bit heavy or you have brush strokes, you're not going to make all those disappear with this pad. That's actually going to start disappearing after you do another coat or two. But try and get those out as much as you can, but we're really just focusing on trying to get this smooth. It's definitely going to need a few more applications. And also these little finishing pads are really good just in between coats. Even if you're not doing this method, it really helps to get out any little brush strokes or imperfections or hairs or anything that's in the midsole. So what I like to do after that before I start painting again, I actually use a little suede brush here. It's just an ultra fine horsehair brush, and I just brush off all those little dust particles that pretty much just sand it off. This is going to make sure all those get knocked off. If you start painting right away, you're basically going to pull all those into your paint. It's definitely going to show up. So I just try and get all those off before I start painting. So from there, it's literally just rinse and repeat. I did the same steps over and over. I'll cover them again at the end. We already removed the tape on this one, but just for fun, and it's kind of cool to look at, I'm going to go ahead and remove the tape on this just so you guys can see how smooth this midsole repaint came out. So now there should be no excuses to have any porous midsoles on your feed, on your timeline, on Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. You should let people know about this video if it's helpful, and I definitely shouldn't see any from you guys, especially the ones I keep up with and the ones I follow already. There's no excuse for it. And this method isn't going to get out every single pore, imperfection, or damage, especially if it's very bad. Again, use the scratch resistant sealer instead, and if enough people want it and have a lot of problems with damage, I can make a video using the scratch resistant sealer, but I covered it pretty well in this video to give you the basics. But if you have more questions, let me know. I'd be happy to help. So again, I'm going to keep providing helpful videos for you guys. If you did find it helpful, hit that like button, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. I'd really appreciate it. It means a lot. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later.
Fat, come on. Where you be from Soul Monkey? Young shows. From Texas to Atlanta, baby, this is how we get down. You know? Switch it up for y'all niggas. Nippy Records, baby. You know what I mean? Get some Hawaiian Tropics, baby. Banana boat. Check me out, y'all. Just a little prequel for y'all.